In terms of process notes, you wrote them when you were going through supervision. You may not have liked doing them, but they are an extremely helpful tool. So take a moment with your notebook handy and reflect on how they were helpful for you. What did you need to include? What was essential to deepen your learning about your facilitation process, about stepping into that role, about your own journey? Take a moment and reflect on that and some of the things that you learned through doing the process notes. Just take a moment and make some notes now. How were they helpful for you in your own self-awareness and in your own professional development?
So this is one area that I think we have really evolved as a faculty group of supervisors, of looking at the process note as an essential part of supervision and one that can be very flexible. So we have an outline, we have a guideline of how to write that, and just as every facilitator is unique, every process note is unique. There's some essential elements. The guideline is for everyone to write their own process note. And I highlight that because that's even been confusing before, where co-facilitators thought they could write a note together because they're in the group. It's about their group. But what they find is as they write it, it's through their experience, remember? So it's not just about the nuts and bolts of the group or what happened, but about the facilitator's experience of the group. And that's something that often we see. A process note is a relationship that you have with the person. They're sharing. It's their self-awareness. It's their strength and their vulnerabilities that they're sharing with you ahead of the supervision call. I talk about it as it's important for me to receive it ahead of time because that gives me time to really reflect on the group. It's something that as a supervisor, I will read more than once. I'll take some notes, I'll think about it, I'll meditate on it, I'll compare across, if I have 4 people on a call, what are some common themes or teaching points that would be helpful to bring to the supervision session. So it's really important, as we've talked about, being very specific, and that guideline of getting them 24 hours in advance is really important. And if I have someone whose group is the night before, it's important for me to be flexible with that and say, okay, I'm going to make sure I have time before the call to get the note and really work with people on that.
And in terms of guiding people on writing these notes, the notes need to be very concrete. They have to have a little bit about how the facilitator was coming into the group, a little bit about the things they covered and how they did that, what was happening with group members. And particularly, it's helpful to have them add moments where there was a dynamic interaction. So where a group member may have shared something, they wanted to respond, or they were sure or weren't sure how to do that, what they said, what they felt, they as the facilitator, how they responded, what happened next. Because you really want those meaty moments to be able to explore how the facilitator is stepping in. So if they only give you an overview of, hey, it felt great and everybody had a good time, you have nothing to work with in supervision. So it is an ongoing process of helping facilitators become much more descriptive and concrete in what they're sharing with the external and the internal process that's occurring. You always want to be able to hear both of those things and know how they navigated it or what got in the way of them navigating it.
So a practical tip is on your call for them to have the process note in front of them and to really go through with them how to provide that more detail, how to really bring their experience into their reporting to you. Because that's a different lens too for them. We want them to write it as a narrative. In a narrative, there's a better chance that they're going to get into the flow and the experience if they write it as, here's a question and here's my answer to that bullet point, they don't get the whole experience of the group. So it's really important to ask people to write as a narrative. At the end of the process note, we ask, what would you like to focus on in supervision? Mm-hmm. And I think this is one easy way to hear about what are their goals. Mm-hmm. What are, this is our contract with them, is we want this to be useful and helpful to them. So we want to make sure that we understand that and have that agreement going into the call.
And you want that specific. So not just, I want to learn more about leading groups. It may be, yes, I want to learn how to navigate when somebody triggers me because I'm not sure what to do. Or I want to learn what to do when check-in goes long and I'm one of the people who's emotional. Right? You want it really specific to be able to best support them. The other thing is, in terms of their self-reflection in the process note, you want to listen for whether they're in an observer role or if they're actually connected to themselves in the group. So the difference is, you may have somebody who writes a process note and you can hear the tone with which they're writing might be something like, as we did this exercise, I noticed that group members shared only to a certain degree and I thought that was strange. Versus, as group members were sharing, I noticed they didn't go deep, and within myself I felt an urge to ask a follow-up question, but I felt really uncomfortable doing so. I wasn't sure what to do. Right? So you can tell the difference between the facilitator's notes when they are connected to themselves in the group versus disconnected in an observer role. And you want to redirect them.
And when you help them, I think you want to ask, what is it like to write it? Because the challenges can be there. It could be a challenge of, I'm not really sure what to write, or I feel anxious about what I'm writing, or I'm having a hard time finding the time to write it. So I think those are all really important questions, so it becomes part of the learning rather than a task that they feel they have to do. The other thing about a well-written process note, the benefit is then when they go to write their papers, if they're in the certification part of supervision, they will have all the information about their group experience, about them, it makes writing those 2 process papers much easier. Definitely. I often will ask co-facilitators too if they want to share the process notes, and some do and some don't. So there's not one right way, but that might be something to ask them. Share with each other after they've written theirs.
Right.
Because sometimes people put very private things in there, and I want to respect that. But also there can be some shared learning. So it's something to explore. And I don't think there's one right way to do that.
And it's knowing that sometimes in a process note, what one facilitator is sharing is a frustration co-facilitating with the other facilitator. So you want to make sure that they have a chance in their process note to reflect on what was coming up for them, navigating the group with the co-facilitator, but also sometimes it's things that come up in the other co-facilitators sharing. So you want to help build the trust there so that they can candidly explore and share what's happening.